Hey guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, The Bright Side Girl, and today we're going to be doing my June reading wrap-up. I want to apologize for how late this video is. I actually pre-filmed it probably just a few days before the end of June so that I could be like prepared for Mermaid Marathon and be ahead. And then when I went to edit the video, I saw that I was like blurry the whole time and I had something in my teeth and I forgot a couple books. It was a disaster. So I decided to refilm it, but with the readathon and everything happening, I just waited until it was done. So this video is going to be all the books that I read in June, both audio and physical books for Mermaid Marathon, which started June 27th, so there's only a couple days left in the month anyway. And then I will have a separate Mermaid Marathon reading wrap up that will have all of the books I completed just for the readathon, and then I'll have my normal July reading wrap up in August. First up, we're going to start with the books that I physically read for June. Okay, the first thing I physically read, and I already returned it to the library, is Space Boy. This is, I think, volume 13. I believe this is the newest volume. I think there's another one coming out this fall. I started this graphic novel series during Galaxy-a-thon this spring, which is my space sci-fi themed readathon, and I fell in love with it. It's young adult, it's very fun, it's very witty and smart and quick, and I absolutely love it. So I've been giving them all 5 stars after the first couple, so I adored it, and the art style is amazing. It is about a young girl that lives on a space station because her family like works there and they're like on a ship trying to get somewhere, and then her father gets fired and relocated back to Earth, and she hasn't been there, and she gets like cryogenically frozen. She shows up, I think 27 years later, but she's the same age, so her friend on the space station is like 30 or 40 now, and there's just a whole bunch of things that happen. She has to learn about all the things that have happened while she was frozen and all this kind of stuff, and it's adorable. Highly recommend. Then I finished Within Ash and Stardust by Shani Lane Feener. This is the 3rd book in the Amid Stars and Darkness trilogy, which I've been talking about quite a bit on my channel. Again, I started the first one last year for Galaxy-a-thon, and then I read the second one this year for Galaxy-a-thon, and I finally finished the 3rd one, which completes another series for me, which, as some of you may know, I've got a mission to complete some series this year that I will talk about at the end of the video. So I loved this. This was probably like a 4.5. It wasn't like my all-time favorite ending, but it was very satisfying still, and I really enjoyed it, and some twists and turns happened in there, and I just really love this series. So this series is about a girl that is mistaken for an alien princess, and she is like whisked away on an alien spaceship, and she has to like figure out what to do amidst all these aliens. Aliens are kind of like normal in this world, but not being like taken up into a spaceship and thrown into their world. And it's really like wild and fun. Very young adult, but I love it. It has a really great romance in here. Our character is super feisty and fun, and they're just so enjoyable. I'm gonna order some of Shani's other books probably around Christmas time because I really enjoyed this one so much. And then I'm kind of reorganizing and I cannot find my copy, but I also physically read Sweetly by Jackson Pierce. This is part of a fairy tale series, so a big theme you'll see in this video for June before Mermaid Marathon. There are so many series that follow different fairy tales. So like one book will be like Beauty and the Beast, and the next one will be like Cinderella, and sometimes they connect together like they do with like Cinder, Cress, Scarlet. All of those connect together even though they follow different stories and characters. They all are one big series, and sometimes it's just totally a separate series with completely different characters and no involvement with the other books, like with the Twisted Tales series that we'll talk about in a second. So I have been reading a lot of these series, or the first like 2 books in the series, to see if they connect, because a lot of the series have a Little Mermaid retelling somewhere along the line. But I'm kind of like a rule follower when it comes to this, so I don't want to read them out of order if they go together, if that makes sense. So I read the first one, Sisters Red, last month. I actually was a reread for me. I love it. It's a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, and there are 2 sisters and they're werewolf hunters, and it's so great. They're modern retellings, but they have plenty of like magic and things in there. And then this one is a Hansel and Gretel retelling, very loose retelling. And at first when I was reading it, I was like, these do not connect at all because you're following totally separate characters. But then we get some things that happened from the first book thrown in here, and then we get some little inklings about what's going on in the next book. So even though they follow different characters, I highly recommend you read them in order, because the little sprinklings of things that have happened in the past or before are so good. I loved this book so much. I think it's on my top 5 favorite reads of the year so far. It's not like the most amazing thing ever written, but I loved it the whole time. It was so magical and had perfect twists in it. I just thought it was really sweet and really fun, and it kept my attention the whole time. And I'm just really enjoying Jackson Pierce's writing style. You'll hear me gush about the next book in this series in my Mermaid Marathon wrap-up, which should be up in just a couple days. I really loved it. So I gave this one 5 stars. My 5 stars can kind of go a little bit all over the place. I am kind of particular with my 5 stars, but if it's something that I just enjoyed the entire time and it was just a good reading experience, it's gonna be a 5-star for me, even if the writing isn't like the most amazing thing in the world, or it didn't like rip my heart out of my chest. But I so enjoyed this. Highly recommend the series and highly recommend you check them out in order. Okay, then I did some audiobooks. So the first audiobook that I listened to was The Tethering by Megan O. Russell. Again, this is one of those fairy tale series. So the second book in this series is called The Siren's Realm. So I knew there was some mermaid action coming up, siren action. So this one has kind of got like a very loose Harry Potter vibe. We have like our main character, and then he finds out that he's kind of magical, and then he finds out about this whole like society of like magical kids and people, and kind of gets like swept up into the world. I did like this one. I'll put the narrator right here. The narrator was not my favorite. He was kind of bland, so it was a little bit dull, but the book itself was really good. I didn't get to the second one for Mermaid Marathon, but I probably will read it here pretty soon. Has a slightly more middle grade vibe than it does young adult, so just kind of keep that in mind. I'll read kind of anything, so that doesn't bother me. I just like to know going in. But yeah, so far, first book in the series, probably about a 3.5 star. Then again, I own this book, but I don't know where I put it. So Once Upon a Dream, this is by Liz Braswell. This is the second book in the Twisted Tale series, which is a Disney series. These are all twisted on the Disney version of the fairy tale or the story. So this one is like, what if they never defeated Maleficent or whatever. So basically Sleeping Beauty is kind of trapped in a dreamlike state. This one was really great. I didn't love the first Twisted Tale book, which was an Aladdin twist. It was like, what if Jafar got the lamp kind of a deal. But this one was super unique. It did not follow the movie very closely at all, but there's not like a lot to the Sleeping Beauty movie like there are with some other ones. So I was okay with that. I think I actually preferred that. And it was kind of like a dystopian type vibe. It was a little bit darker than I was expected. There's like some light trigger warnings for like self-harm in here, which I wasn't really expecting. Nothing like overly dark. I'm a little sensitive, but I really liked this one. It is currently my favorite. I read Part of Your World, which you'll see again in that Mermaid Marathon wrap-up, and I liked it more than Aladdin, but I still liked this one the best. So this was a 4-star read for me. I just liked the way the twists and the turns went. It was really different than I was expecting. So that was promising because I really didn't care for the Aladdin one that much. Then I read The Conjuring, the audiobook, the narrator right here. This is the 3rd book in a witchy series that's adult. So I wrapped up another series. Yay, so excited. So this series is interesting. They all do connect to each other, but they kind of follow different witches as like the main character for each book. The first book is Vine Witch, and it basically follows a witch that like kind of helps like with the weather and like to maintain a vineyard, and it's got all these magical, delightful qualities about it. These are not spicy romance books, as a lot of people have been misled to believe. Like there's definitely some romance in here, but it's not the main focus of the book. There's a lot of magic and a lot of whimsicalness. I loved the first one. I enjoyed the second one. I probably liked this one the least. I just didn't feel as connected to the characters, and I think it might have had a different narrator. I physically read the first one and I audiobooked the second one in this one. So I do still recommend the series as a whole. This one had a little bit of a Midsummer Night's Dream retelling-ish vibe about it, which I did like because I love Midsummer Night's Dream. This one for me though was probably more of like a 3.5 star. It was my least favorite in the series, but I would still recommend. Okay, really trying to finish up some series. So for June, I reread Court of Shadows by Madeleine Roux. This is the second book in the House of Furies trilogy. And then I read for the first time, to wrap up the series, Tomb of Ancients, again by Madeleine Roux, same series. So I completed another series, yay. I was gonna try and save this one for the fall, but this audiobook is so short that I just decided to wrap it up. So I love this series so much. It is so good. It's so underrated. So the first book, it's kind of got like a gothic Victorian vibe, and our main character is kind of poor, and I think she kind of like steals or like deceives people for money, and this old woman comes and she's like, hey, I have a job for you at this manor if you want to come and work there. And she goes to this big manor like in the country, and she finds out that there's like weird things happening with the staff and the owner and everyone that works there. It has kind of got some creepy vibes to it, and she's trying to kind of figure out what's happening. Not a scary series. Definitely got some dark and creepy vibes slightly. There is a lot of magical things in here as well. I really love them. This book was so surprising and did so many like crazy things I was not expecting. I gave the first two, I think, 5 stars, and I think this one I gave like 4.5. Overall though, fabulous. I can't wait to read more from Madeleine Roux. These are just so wonderful. They're perfect for fall. They're the perfect like slightly creepy and eerie but not terrifying books. Great for Not So Scary-a-thon coming up as well. Love. Highly recommend, and the narrator is one of my favorites. She's amazing. Okay, then I read a few mermaid-esque books for the month before the readathon to kind of like prepare for the readathon, because I had recommendation videos to do and also some of them were just like too long. So one of the ones I read was the Mermaid and Mrs Hancock, because this book, first of all, is like an 18-hour audiobook, so not good for a readathon. I prefer like shorter audiobooks, and also I had a feeling that this was not going to be super mermaid heavy, which happens a lot. It's so funny how they put mermaid in the title, but then there's like almost no mermaidy stuff in it. This was so strange. So good things. The writing was really beautiful, and I didn't like hate reading it. The narrator was absolutely fantastic. But I didn't really understand like the full plot, and there was like a lot of things happening. It got kind of weirdly dark. It had some strange things in it. This is definitely an adult book. It has adult topics in it for sure. So this is basically like historical fiction. I think it's set in like 1700s. Basically, Mr. Hancock has a ship captain that does like trading and things for him. Like that's what he does for work. And he gets an urgent knock on the door, and his ship captain is there, and he's like, hey, guess what? I sold your ship because I found a dead baby mermaid. And you're like, okay. And he's like, we can like show this off kind of like P.T. Barnum style and make some money back. And Mr. Hancock's like freaking out because he wants his ship back. So he's trying to like figure out what to do with this mermaid, and it kind of causes this whole like uproar of excitement in the town. There's also a big part in here about like a local brothel house, and you're learning about like all the girls that work there, and there's kind of intercrossing things. You don't really have a lot with the mermaid or Mrs. Hancock for almost all of the book, other than them finding this like dead baby mermaid that they're gonna like show off. And it's really not about that. There are some kind of magically things that happen towards the end, but this is so long and all over the place that I only gave it 2.5 stars, even though the writing is beautiful, just because I just didn't feel like there was a point. Like regardless of there not being like true mermaidy things happening, just as a historical fiction book, I was just kind of confused and kind of waiting for it to end, even though it wasn't like torture to read. So I am going to unhaul this one. I usually keep almost all my mermaid books, but since it's not truly mermaid, I probably am going to unhaul this one. It's one of my lowest ratings of the year, despite the beautiful writing. I will try something else from her though, because the writing is really pretty. Then I reread Beneath the Haunting Sea by Joanna Ruth Meyer, because this is a duology, and I wanted to read the second book, which I did in July, so I'll talk about that in July's reading wrap up. So this one, again, narrator, incredible. I have mixed feelings about this one. It does have some mermaidiness to it, but not a lot. It does have a lot of the vibes though, a lot of the like nautical, whimsical vibes that we like from these types of books, because our main character is supposed to be like the empress of this huge portion of the world. She gets overthrown like right before they announce it, and she gets kind of banished off to this by like land or island with her and her mom. They're on a ship traveling for the majority part of this book, and this has a lot to do with like gods and goddesses and the ancient tales of like her people and her mother like telling her things in different fairy tales and stories, and her trying to figure out if they're real or not. There is a cute little romance in here. The very last part gets kind of almost overly whimsical, and I remember feeling that way last time as well. I feel like people are really gonna love it or really dislike it once it gets to that part. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think this is probably more of like a 3.75 for me, but I still recommend it. It's good for Mermaid Marathon as well. And I'll talk about the second one in the next wrap up. And then lastly, I reread, lots of rereading this year so I can kind of wrap up some series. So I reread All the Stars and Teeth so that I could read All the Tides of Fate. So we're gonna talk about All the Stars and Teeth first. This one is kind of hard to explain. There's also a lot happening here. This is by Adeline Grace. Narrator is okay for this one. I really hate how the narrator narrates a certain character in here, and I've had like several of my friends tell me the same thing. So she's not a bad narrator, but she narrates one of the characters in a really obnoxious way. It's very strange. So this one, we have like our main character, and she is doing this ceremony with her dad. She's supposed to kind of like take over this land and kind of, I think, be like in charge of it as well. And something goes awry, and there's like this dark magic at play, and she winds up getting imprisoned and having to leave. We have a pirate in here. There is a mermaid in here. And it's just got a lot going on. I like the cute little romance. I liked the mermaid parts. They were really like fun and kind of funny. It's got some darker elements, got some political things. I really enjoyed this first book. It was like a 4-star read, even upon rereading with the audio narrator that I didn't like. But the second book, All the Tides of Fate, I don't know what this is. So it had a plot that I was not expecting. It kind of came out of nowhere. It honestly felt like it was a separate book from the first one, and it is, but it felt like it didn't belong with the series. The plot they chose was kind of basic and weird, and then our main character is grieving for a certain reason, and then she's kind of like overly annoying and mad at her love interest. I actually didn't like the main two characters as much in this one. I liked the other two characters more, and the ending was decent, but I really didn't understand like what the full plot was, and it was kind of all over the place. So this one was like a 3-star read for me, unfortunately. The narrator for this one though is different and better than the first narrator, so that's good. I had a couple other friends feel the same way, so I don't feel like I'm I'm crazy. I almost want to unhaul them both, not because I hated the second one, but just because it kind of changed the way I felt about it. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Let me know what you think down below. So unfortunately, not my favorite, but at least I finished another duology. Okay, so for finishing series, I'm doing good. I'm gonna put the series pictures that I finished so far over here so you guys can see them. So the deal is the number on the bottom was 47 when I started. However, if I read more in the series and I don't want to continue on, like let's say I read the second book and I don't like the second book, and there's 4 more books in the series and I'm not going to read them, and I'm going to change that number to be 46. I hope that makes sense. So lowering the number that I started with, which was 47, based on how I feel about continuing on with the series. Hopefully that makes sense. I am not adding any series I start this year until the end of the year. I think that's what I'm going to do from now on. So I'm also trying to make sure I'm not starting too much so this number doesn't go crazy. My goal is to have this number be at least 22. Like I only have 22 unfinished series, including the ones I've started this year. So it's going okay. I'm finishing some things I've really wanted to, and I have some that only have like 1 left in the series. So I'm trying to do like at least 1 a week. So going good so far. So here are the physical books that I read for June before Mermaid Marathon, and here are the audiobooks that I read for June. Overall, a pretty great reading month. I'm having a really great reading month in July. Excited to talk to you about the mermaid books and the non-mermaid books, so stay tuned for those videos. Let me know if you've read any of these and if you had similar thoughts and feelings, or if they're on your TBR, and I'll just see you next time on the bright side.